Hello, everybody, and how are you all doing today? It's another beautiful, rainy day here in Seattle. Because we really did need the rain. It was really, 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 really warm, like ungodly warm. Why did you do that, nature?
I didn't like
But
it.
yeah, didn't like it. But yes, today is August 21st, 2020, and we got a lot of news come up. And also, guess who's here with us today? Oh wait, hold on. Position. This one. Hey, it's Hawk. Hawk is back. How you doing, Hawk?
Happy to be here. So glad. So,
Yeah. I hear that you have a big move in coming in, a lot of like new exciting things for you happening.
yeah, so within the next couple of weeks, my wife is finally moving in. We got married a little over a year ago. She's putting her house up on sale shortly after. I'm turning 50. My granddaughter will be 3 months old. Lots of stuff going on.
Oh man, yeah, that's a lot to happen all of a sudden. But yes, also very, very, very much hype. That's a lot of really good things going on
Yeah.
for you. So hey, looking up. Oh yeah, also, what's going on if you guys didn't know, Emma, you want to tell us about what you've been binge watching online lately?
So I've been watching a lot of GDQ. So every year, multiple times per year, I don't know, the timing's weird, but Games Done Quick or Awesome Games Done Quick is on Twitch. It's live streamed. It's people speed running video games. And from the description of it, I'm sure a lot of people will say, oh, I'm totally into that. And other people will say, that's weird. Why would I watch that? I was in the latter camp until I actually started watching it. And it's just so fascinating. If you've played these games before, to see the ways that they navigate through the levels is awesome. Also,
Yes.
they just play the weirdest games there, like Pringles, the video game, or Baba Is You is a fun indie game I played a little bit of. So it's a great way to actually see a lot of indie games.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I think actually the descriptor of why would anybody watch that
Right.
until you go watch it yourself really applies to a lot of stuff on Twitch.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people had the same reaction of like, why would I watch other people play board games or role-playing games or video games in general?
Yeah.
And then you kind of go to Twitch and you're just like, sometimes you want to put something on and mess around, or sometimes you just love the game and want to engage with it when you're not playing. Like, it's one of those things that just doesn't, for a lot of people, just does not make sense until you see it. And then you're like, oh, this is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I think this is one of the big selling points of Twitch. Obviously, y'all are watching us on Twitch now, so you are connected to this platform, but it really shines. Just having it on as something to watch in the background or getting sucked into these worlds. And a lot of it, for me personally, I'm not as comfortable with a lot of platforming elements and a lot of Twitch gaming. So I love seeing the stories of the games, but it's not as fun for me to play because I rage quit and throw my computer through the window the 50th time I fall in the Mario hole. Or I guess the Nintendo just
the Nintendo hole.
Throw out the Nintendo hole. But yeah, so it's a fun way to watch and consume stuff. Also, I did want to announce is what's happening, not really with me, but Tabletop Simulator is on sale. So it goes on sale once in a while, and now is one of the times you can get it for half off. And for any board gamer out there, I absolutely recommend picking this up. There are so many mods in the workshop where you can play many board games.
There were a lot of games. Yeah, a lot of games during Gen Con Online were running Tabletop Simulator.
Yeah, a lot of online conventions are using Tabletop Simulator now. So if you're interested in participating in the conventions, playing online, testing games, there's just a lot of fun to be had there right now. So I definitely recommend.
Is it on sale? Is it on sale directly on Steam or through Humble Store or something like that?
On Steam. Yeah, on Steam sale. 50% off. So definitely check that out.
Get it. And then Derek, you had some new things coming in for you today.
I did. So I think we talked about Cobwebs at one point. It was a Kickstarter for like an X-Files story game, board game thing. The Fancy Agon arrived. This is from Evil Hat. It's basically, I think the flippant way to summarize this is it's the Odyssey, the RPG. And it's just got really, really nice art on the inside too.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Very, very cool. Very neat. And then another gorgeous RPG showed up, Lancer.
Hmm.
This is
Oh
like
yes,
the
Lancer.
the very like anime frontier mech piloting RPG that is everyone's darling. Really cool art, surprisingly big and hefty. So that all arrived. So those were nice surprises. And they've been trying to distract me from one of our cats died during Gen Con, which was rough, and now her sister is also going through problems again. So we're a little distracted as we're trying to sort out our pet friend issues.
Mm.
Yeah, we need some positive waves going over to Derek to just make sure it's just like a little phase, and then the cat will start getting better.
Everyone cross your fingers for Smash Mouth. That you can improve.
Wait, that's actually
is that your cat's actual name?
Yes, the cat's actual name is Smash Mouth. So Mr. Biscuits is the one who passed. Smash Mouth is the one who is sick now. Testicles Fluffnutter von Guterstein III, or Soup, is the third cat that we have.
Soup.
Soup.
Oh,
I like it. It's a good name. I think, for me, my related news is that, okay, so we're not going to be able to really see it, but like I just got in the mail. Hold on, that's something else. Companions Tale. It's green screen because it's a green box, but I can't wait to play it. We were supposed to play it the other weekend, but a lot of my friends got sick, so we couldn't play it. So, social distance. Gotta do it. Still do it, please. Wear a mask. On that note, also, let's go ahead and hop right into headlines as we're going.
Didn't Hawke have more stuff that he wanted to share?
Hawke,
or no, you trimmed it down. I see what you did.
Stealth edits.
I moved it to try to allow, because we tend to go over because of me, and so I figured we'll let you get through the others, and then I'll bring you up to speed on the other stuff. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
But yes, still congratulations on achieving level 50. Level 50.
It's 9/11. That's when it'll happen. 9/11.
Oh, okay. So it's not yet, but it's
Yeah,
okay. It's
yeah.
really soon. All right. Very, very cool. But yes, jumping right into headlines. Emma, there's a new exciting game on Steam that everyone's talking about.
Yes, there is. Everyone is talking about Root, now in early access on Steam from Direwolf Digital. I'm excited about this. I've talked a lot in the past about how I'm a big believer of digital adaptations of board games. I think they're great ways to learn the rules, to hop in when you don't have other players, especially right now, to play online, because we're not really doing physical games anymore. But I did actually get a chance to look at this a little bit at PAX East, and it's just cute and fun. They really captured the art for this. The animations are great. It's got a lot of the soul of the game, which I think it's just a perfect implementation or an example of what a digital version of a board game can be. And there's things you can do in digital, right? The animations and things that you can't have in the physical game. So if you are going to add on these pieces, and it makes sense to make it digital. I don't think it takes away from the physical version. And I'm just excited. It looks like they've done a really good job with it. So I definitely recommend people check that out.
Yeah, like when I saw the headline and saw that it was available for Mac, I just went to Steam and bought it and was like, cool. Like, Root is one of my favorite games. This version looks like a really good adaptation. And like, to your point, just to kind of explain it a little bit more, if people aren't looking at the images, it's not just a board on a screen that you put your pieces on. They did, full like 3D rendered models and stuff like that. Like, all the rules look exactly the same. You just get to see your cute little animals kind of hop around and engage in warfare.
Yeah, because you have the awesome illustrations of the characters that you see on the box and the marketing materials, but they are the characters on the screen. So a lot of great stuff going on there. And Direwolf Digital's done a lot of really great stuff digitally for board games. So and all the rules and implementations are there. Root can be a little tricky to get into at first, a little bit of complexity there. So it's nice to, with games like this, tutorials, and they ease you in very nicely. So,
or I mean, also just the fact that you don't have to set things up, you don't have to, it's going to guide you through a couple turn by turn motions and stuff like that. Anything that you can automate to make it faster and easier to just get more games in, I think is really helpful with board games.
Exactly.
But then in Root specifically, just because every faction is effectively a completely different game that shares some basic rules and how they connect with each other, means that like when you get Root, the physical game, there are 4 board games happening at once on the same board.
Yeah.
And having a video game that allows you to, or a digital adaptation that allows you to just get many more play sessions in, is going to give you a more chance to see the different sides of the game and start to really get a handle on them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that can be tough about really becoming comfortable with a board game. What's nice about video games, you do play them so much. When I play a lot of Magic digitally, and when I play physical Magic, I feel a lot more comfortable with just the cycles of the game. So just playing through a few rounds, if all your friends do that, and then you come to play the physical version, it can be a lot easier to get ramped up to it. I did want to double check on this too. It looks like it is single player, so there's AI to it, which is great. Online PvP, split screen, so local PvP too, and cross-platform. So I mean, this is great too. They didn't just make a single player version on Steam, they put in all of the multiplayer options in there as well. So it's exciting to see.
I can't wait to give it a try.
Yeah. And then this is just a step closer to augmented reality. I can have it.
You got very excited, but I had an eye appointment earlier this week, and I did half jokingly tell my doctor that, like, hey, I'm just waiting for to get cyber eyes, so if you could get on that. And he's like, I'm going to burst your bubble right now, kid. You're not getting those anytime soon. And I was like, oh, come on.
No, just give me the glass. I have glasses anyways. Just give me the projected view.
Yeah, don't burst my bubble. Keep my bubble.
I want to believe.
Well, he also gave me the middle finger at one point during the interview, so I feel like we have a bond and a connection that I don't usually get with a doctor.
Oh, sorry about that. We were just talking too much into the robots know we were talking about them and about the future. And it was the future waves got crossed. And so, since the evil robot lords have deemed that we need to move on subjects. Well, if you guys have been looking around, this is something that you could probably chime into, Hawke. What's been going around is basically, Derek, you got combat on wheelchairs.
Yeah, well, not only that, we have a wheelchair designed for combat in D&D. So this is kind of a capital D discourse situation on Twitter. So it's one of those things of, if you are not extremely online like I am, you may not have even kind of heard about this idea or the controversy or whatever else. Generally the good stuff is kind of what's filtering off the internet. But what happened was an enterprising D&D player went out and made a bunch of rules for a combat wheelchair, which they thought was really cool. They put it up for free for everyone to share and play online. A bunch of other people thought it was cool. And that kind of sparked a reaction against it, where there were a number of people who got up in arms about how unrealistic it was and how it was ruining D&D and how it was the worst thing ever. And
how dare in a fantasy world that it's unreal.
Yeah, well, it's also
talk about how ridiculous Dragonborn are.
Yeah, or like, do we even need, like, does anybody else remember Planescape when you could play like a goat centaur, and then anytime there was a dungeon module that had stairs, everyone would just kind of be like, a ladder. Like, how do you climb the ladder? I guess you don't. So goodbye. Like, you just dealt with that. No one was like, oh wow, centaurs are ruining, this inclusion for centaurs is ruining D&D. People were just like, oh, that's funny, we're gonna play anyway. But now when someone's like, hey, I'm in a wheelchair, I'd like to play a character in a wheelchair who's badass, can I do that? And a lot of the community is like, 2 thumbs up, sounds great. Not only that, but the people were like, some people went out and made 3D models and started printing miniatures for it. They did some incredible sculpts. Like, it has sparked a lot of cool stuff. But the corner of the internet who is filled with rage because of how unrealistic it is predictable, unfortunate, but also attracting more attention to this cool idea. And now we have a slew of articles. We have a whole miniatures line.
Yes.
So good job.
And speaking of being, badass in the wheelchair and such, specifically that phrase, do you remember the movie Knights of Badassdom that was shot here in Spokane some years ago? With Peter Dinklage and Summer Glau and others, and also the Gonzaga University priest and everything. Well, he played the king that was in a wheelchair that was all decked out, with spikes and everything, and he's wielding, it was a LARP group that the movie is about. And so he's wielding the axe in the wheelchair, having others help push him into battle as they all charged each other for combat LARP. We work with Muscular Dystrophy Association many times. We did a whole summer camp of combat LARP with 21 kids in wheelchairs, some with trachs and everything. They wanted us to do full combat boffer LARP. And so we had, some of them didn't have the upper body strength to lift the boffers, so we made lances for them instead. And they formed a phalanx of like 7 electric wheelchairs charging. And when you have 7 400-pound wheelchairs charging you, that's just the batteries. You will get out of the way.
Yeah.
It's awesome. On accessiblerpg.com, I'll be putting some photos up of the different people who've LARPed up their wheelchairs, like a steampunk wheelchair and all these different types of wheelchairs, just totally decked out. I wasn't in a wheelchair long enough to have time to deck mine out when I was, but it was starting, it's pretty cool what they do with it. How is that any different than going ahead and doing that in the game and trying to work out whatever the logistics are in that game? In mythology and most Western tales, certainly, often the hero has some sort of deficit they have to overcome, some challenge that they're not the hero you would expect. It's only in more recent decades that the heroes all start a lot more as superheroes become more and more dominant. But you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of myth and fantasy and such of people with all kinds of shortcomings that they have to overcome in the course of their adventures. And so it's just another challenge to try to figure out, okay, how do we make that work? And hey, let's make it cool and have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
Well, Bonzi, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just thinking on like, even with yes, they're good that they're like our rules, and there's I don't see anything wrong with it for people who need rules, but I also see from the other perspective, like, I didn't really need the rules. If somebody wanted to play somebody like closer to their character, it's like the same thing with like different skin tones and stuff being in different areas. If like the story allows it, just to, like, we're all real people here. And how we're going to tell the story is up to us. Like, as a DM, you could be like, okay, you got your set, you're like, you're different, you got a stairs or some kind of like then you could just be like, you could just get over it because you have teammates there and you've worked out this stuff before, and you also are a centaur. Like, you learned how to do these things.
If you're not creative enough to come up with an explanation as to how you can get a wheelchair through a dungeon, I suspect that you will encounter other deficits of imagination down the road. Like, it's just like, also like if someone at your table is like, hey, I feel strongly I want to do this thing. Like, if you care about them and you're playing with them, your answer should be, cool, let's figure out how to do that thing. Not like, I'm sorry, you're not realistic enough to exist in my universe.
Paper. And like, as a warlock, I can make a ball of fire. I can make fire be in a circle and burn people in a circle. I can make a wall. Like, I can shoot laser bolts out of my hands. You can't make the wheelchair just go up the ladder.
Fly spell. Doctor Who with the Daleks, they finally gave them the ability to levitate because of the stairs issue, right? And later Doctor Who's. Right?
Yeah.
Long time they were.
If we want an example of an entire enemy race that is wheelchair bound, effectively, like, Daleks were still scary, but like to the point of magic, I think an actual interesting point that came up is the creator was very adamant that, like, this is not a magical wheelchair. Apparently they provided rules for magical wheelchair, but they wanted to say, look, this is not a magical wheelchair. You could play a perfectly mundane fighter who's just super awesome in this wheelchair, and you're cool and you're as badass as somebody who isn't. You can make it magical if you want, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Well, there's like you said, creativity, space for that. You might build your party around it, right? Like you might have chosen your teams is like, well, okay, there's a lot of ladders here for whatever reason, or stairs, there's I have somebody in my party who has an ability that can do that even if I'm not magical. Or like maybe your world is wheelchair accessible. Whoa, right? Maybe there are wheelchair users in your universe.
I mean, like dungeons are already kind of ridiculous and nonsense anyway. So just what if all the dungeons happen to have ramp? Like,
right.
Okay. Like video games do that because they don't, like, some video games just don't want to deal with ladders. So the mechanics for ladders don't exist. And not a whole lot of people are like, well, this is unplayable. Or even there's the video that I saw on Twitter that was going around a lot of a guy at a rock climbing gym in a wheelchair, and he just climbs up just his arms, and he does way better than I've ever done when I've gone rock climbing. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. People forget that there's actual people in the world right now that are in wheelchairs that do incredibly awesome stuff, and like post about it and then show off, like, oh hey, like one purposely like flips themselves like on the side of the ground, and they're like, this is how I get up. Boom. It's like very quickly, like I don't need help. I'm independent in my own right. It's also
And
so the moral of the story is, like, because I have a feeling that we could talk about how correct this is for a long time, but I think the moral of the story is the rules are out there. There's actually a bunch of really cool minis out there now. So if you know anybody in your gaming group who has always kind of wanted to play a character in a wheelchair, and you're playing D&D and you want some rules to back that up, then check them out and grab what you think is cool.
And check out also, we've talked about before, the Fate Accessibility Toolkit. Right, with a lot of ideas of how to play all kinds of challenges for your characters. You can apply that to any game because Fate's very lightweight. They recently did another update. They've added sign language signs now and stuff too to start helping. So we'll talk a little bit more later when we get to that.
Dive into that. Yeah. So more news since we're going on. Hey, for you who are happen to be in the European or specifically the UK area, UK Game Expo is going virtual this weekend. It's happening right now. So if you're in the UK and want to learn about, like, all of these like board games, various different RPGs, go ahead and check it out. There's many free events and over 900 things you can go ahead and check out. And also, hint, somebody has a panel on this stream, has a panel in this event. I don't know who. Emma?
Yeah, I'm doing a panel tomorrow. It's going to be all about pitching to publishers. So if you're a designer who wants to pitch your games, definitely tune into that. I'm going to be speaking with Rob Davio and Matt Leacock. So pretty well-known figures in the industry. So I think we're going to have a lot of great advice to give to newer game designers.
So yeah, if you want to go ahead and check out, we as a gaming group as a Gen Con went digital as well. We support other cons that are also exploring the digital area.
You just wanted to sing again. I see how it is.
I did it. I did. I did it short though. I did it short. On other related news, Asmodee, Emma, you have some stuff Asmodee announced?
So they've announced the game Mournequest. This is based on the series of teen novels by Gary McElheron and developed by Backspindle Games. So in this game, you're embarking on a journey through the Mourne Mountains. You're going to be fighting to cast out nightmares, banish the Shimnivore in a battle, and decide the future of humanity. So with this being an IP game, although for a little lesser known of an IP, you're into the Mournequest books, and it's definitely something you should check out.
Ooh, very, very exciting. And of course, Gloom Derek, are you going to tell us more about the gloom of the Derek?
I thought it was Grimdark Derek.
Oh, is it Grim?
It's Grimdark.
Grimdark, because it's Grimdark.
You're getting really close to Grimdalek. Anyway, just to kind of, everything is the same and everything is connected. So the Warhammer 40K app came out a little while ago, and this is something that we had been talking about before the launch of 9th edition. Everybody was really excited about it because digital support for a lot of the Warhammer games from Games Workshop themselves has all been limited in previous editions. So folks were very excited to see what the new app was going to include. Unfortunately, army building and stuff like that has not been included as part of it yet. This definitely feels like they're not labeling it as such, but I think that fans will kind of have the happiest results or feelings if they view it as kind of a early access or a beta launch of something. There are a lot of features there to access the rules. I think you can subscribe to get all of the text from previous codexes from 8th edition. So you can get a whole bunch of stuff that you may have not been picking up or been skipping because it wasn't for your army or whatever, or maybe you missed them because you got into the game later. And it has the core rules in there, so you can search for rules. You can find a lot of things relatively quickly. The core rules for 9th edition are included, but they're basically an embedded PDF currently. So it's one of those things where it's great that the app launched. There's a lot of room for improvement. They actually, it seems like Games Workshop has responded to some of those criticisms fairly well by posting a relatively aggressive kind of timeline for some immediate tweaks and rollout. We're still waiting to see how the army building will work. But overall, like, we're very happy that they have launched a thing. We're hopeful to see where they're going to take it in the future. I'm very curious how it's going to start interacting when they start releasing physical codexes for 9th edition, because they've promised that if you buy the physical book, you'll be able to use a code somehow to unlock the content in the app, and you'll still have it. So it'll be interesting to see what is part of the subscription that they really want people to get, what comes from purchase with something else. There's a lot of directions they could go in. So hopefully they can kind of smooth out that core and then start marching along.
Very, very, very cool. Was that also, is there more news that Warhammer is coming out with as well, Derek?
There is more war. I mean, it's never ending. It's there is only
ending.
war. There's only war in the grimdark future. So I will never stop having war to share with you. But if we remember correctly, we talked about like the Indomitus box and the new edition of Warhammer that just came out and how in demand this Indomitus box was. You know, I think we talked about how it sold out in like 15 minutes worldwide, and how they did a very unusual GW thing of having a print on demand option to allow people to order more if they missed out on the first one. So that was never intended to be the new starter set, though. That was like a special celebratory launch package, basically. They have announced the whole slew of starter boxes, and these are all Space Marines versus Necrons. So it's the same factions that were in that box. It's just, you know, they have kind of different tiers of it. So you can get like a couple models from each side with some paints, or more models from each side with the rules, or you can get a big set that has a bunch of models from each side, the rules, some terrain, some paints. So there's a couple different tiers of starter sets that you can grab if you are new to 40K, or if you really just want to be able to grab like a bunch of minis at a pretty bargain rate to just bulk up the amount of plastic you have to mess around with, basically.
Cool.
Very, very awesome. Well, in not so new news, actually ancient news that we have this, it's been kind of like of course, with everything going on in the world right now, for board game related news, in April, the University Museum of Bergen basically found a 17-year-old or 17,000-year-old board game in Norwegian, in a Norwegian burial mound. There you go. Haha. It comprises of 18 game pieces with elongated dice. The dice being found has happened to be very, very rare. It's BCE or AD 1 through 400. And it could be also like I say, so at was very well preserved, unique to like an early Iron Age in dramatic tribes. of Scandinavian kind of board games. So this just kind of like unlocks like more of the ancient gaming world. And if you're into ancient gaming news and want to learn more about it, I highly suggest you click on that link. I'm sorry, I am slaughtering these names. I really do try.
You're doing great.
So
it's
if
your
you
own
want to go
special style.
it's my own special style. I just kind of go and then pretend that I said it right.
We're never giving you the Necronomicon or any other book in which you need to pronounce things particularly well, because we will be punished. For that.
I just cough over. It's fine.
No, did you not see the movie? That was the problem.
No.
That was the problem.
It's like, you know, it worked when I sang Christmas carols in different languages. I just like
So yeah. I mean, this might be a shock, but I'm just going to let you know that singing Christmas carols is in a slightly different caliber of risk than summoning great old ones or casting eldritch powers that are beyond our ken. I'm just going to let you know that there's a wide spectrum there, and at one side it's okay to just kind of stumble through it, and the other side it's not.
But yes, so if you want to go ahead and look at this, like essentially 17,000-year-old board game, or wait,
1,700.
1,700. Sorry, 1,700-year-old board game. I highly suggest you click on that link just to see the
four-sided dice. Right?
Yes,
it's the long rolling four-sided dice rather than the pyramid type to take your feet out.
Yeah, not the caltrops, but exactly. Like a crystal of stabbing.
Yeah. Which is what we have for our Braille dots. The Braille dice are also that rolling kind as well.
I like
I've come to the conclusion, the heretical conclusion. I don't think any of you are going to like this. I hate D4s.
These ones are better.
They are. Like just take a D8 and number it twice is my advice. Like the caltrop D4s, they're just a pain in the ass to pick up.
Or whatever you step on them, yeah.
I will say though, these ancient dice, like #life goals, I'm just picturing it's like 1,700-year-old dice on my dice window.
I thought you were picturing someone getting a copy of Abandon All Artichokes 2,000 years from now and just being like, look at this amazing artifact of the time before.
I mean, that might be #death. I don't know if I'm still going to be alive.
That's a pretty cool one.
And we like old games like this. You know, it was Derek who had asked us to try to put together the whole International and Ancient Games thing for Gen Con that we did for Gen Con Online. And that was a hit. A lot of people were really excited about getting to see. We were running like Senate from 3,300 BCE approximately is where that goes back to. And then a number of other games, Royal Game of Ur and a whole slew of them. We're still running those over on our website periodically. People request it. That was Derek's pet project. He wanted us to try to bring that to reality, and it was a hit, Derek. People really like that, and they want to see more of that. So
people like games. It's a weird thing, but people like games, and I believe they like to play them.
What?
Yep. Oh, speaking of games, let's go ahead and move to the main reason why we have the wonderful, the amazing, the knowledgeable Hawke here. Tell us a little bit about, role-playing games versus smaller and bigger groups and such.
Okay. That's the main topic for today. We brought it up some time ago about small group formation and communication and dynamics. There's many different theories about social interaction and group dynamics. We found that one of the more accessible ones related to role-playing gaming is Tuckman's theories, which in the business world are often used under the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjoining, and reforming. You see that for business, for projects all the time. And I worked, in tech forever, and we were in projects, and I went through Franklin Covey and went through all that training and came across this as well. And it started seeing a lot of the same patterns in the games that we saw in all these projects. And if you think about it, if you do like a pickup game, it's one thing if you have your friends and such, but even if you're making a whole new group of characters, the characters never met each other before. They come together for the first time. That's forming. They're all new to each other. They tend to try to be on their best behavior at first. Then they go through the storming phase where people are trying to figure out, they're getting frustrated, things aren't getting done. People start fighting over leadership. And you have to get through that storming phase to get through to norming and to performing. which is where the magic really happens with small groups. The small group on this theory is 3 to 9 people. Gaming groups fit well within that. And we see in tabletop gaming, that whole arc can happen in a single session or multiple sessions, depending upon how that is. And it's very fascinating when you start looking at it from that perspective. You can tell which groups are going to be more successful well in advance on how they get through that storming phase and get to norming and performing, if they're going to be a more successful group or not. That you can really start to predict that.
Do you want to talk through those phases? Because this is the thing you've brought up before, but do you, just in case anybody hasn't been around for those episodes,
so
do you want to review what those are?
Yeah. So in this case, we're talking specifically teams, and I'm going to mix. Anything I'm talking about, you can apply to gaming, but it was designed for projects, whether it's engineering, software, whatever. You bring a group of specialized people with specialized skill sets, complementary skill sets together to take on a specific project. So they're all brought together. Usually they don't know each other. They're here because of their skill set. And there's usually a leader, but some groups are more egalitarian. They don't always work that out. Like Silicon Valley, we sometimes didn't have clear leaders. You let people float to the top that way. But anyway, you come together, you're given a task. You need to build widget X, and you have this deadline and these resources. Go figure out how to make that happen. Well, here it is. You've come to the end, and the king has asked you to go tackle this task.
You get the call to adventure.
Exactly. Now go. So usually when you come together, some people might be more standoffish, but generally everybody tries to be polite at first. And you get to your first challenge. And when you get to that first challenge, most people will be kind of like, no, after you. No, after you. I say, no, you're far too kind, after you, right? And you're still in this forming phase where you don't want to step on toes. And the group doesn't do very well. Right? They're not working together. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing. And often groups can get TPK'd because they're not coordinating. So let's say they try to take a challenge, and either they're not overcoming it because they're not working together and people are getting frustrated, or they're getting through it, but there's a lot of losses along the way, and everybody senses we are not doing well. Somebody needs to take charge. Something must be done, right? Dreaded phrase. And so now you have different people who start vying for, well, we should do it my way. No, and now people are not so nice. And it can get downright ugly depending upon the people. Well, research shows that if you avoid the storming phase, you might get to norming, you'll never get to performing. So norming, you finally want to get to norming where everybody now knows their roles within the group. So you came in with a skill set. So I might be a fighter, you might be a cleric, you might be a wizard. We know those roles. But then there's in the group roles of the leadership and the map maker and these other things that you need to do to make the group work that are outside of your profession, class, what have you. Same thing with projects. And those things have to be worked out. And storming phase, you start to figure out what their weaknesses are and where their strengths are and what you can count on and not count on. He says he's a thief, but he has no business disarming traps because it keeps blowing up in our faces. He should probably be doing the stealthy stuff, not the disarming traps thing. Because I'm the greatest thief there ever was. No, you're not. And so the group still needs to work with who's there and try to figure out what resources can still be used. So eventually get to norming where now okay, this person we accept as the leader, we've got this going on, etc. And now we can move forward. And a norming group will succeed, but the magic doesn't happen. They don't do exceptionally well. They'll get through the dungeon. They'll survive it mostly. You'll have a higher character loss if it's a deadly dungeon. They won't do as well as they could have, but they'll get through it. And if you avoid storming, the best you can hope for is to get to norming at the best. You will never get to performing without storming. So if you go through the storming phase, you get to norming, then because you went through storming, you can get to performing because you really know what people's strengths and weaknesses are. So when I worked as an executive for a lot of different companies, we would go on these executive retreats and go through different challenges. And we needed to get to know each other and how our styles were, our communication styles. In relationships, there's love languages that you talk to. You have to figure out all of this as a group if you want to compete in a high-paced industry.
Now I'm just imagining a bunch of CEOs just asking each other what their love language is. I understand that it's packaged. I understand it's packaged very differently for a retreat for powerful people, but I am just very amused at like a bunch of white men in suits just being like, "Well, what is your love language?"
Well, and I am also a volunteer for the Dalai Lama's Charter of Compassion group as a volunteer for many years. And so that's actually not that far off from some of those retreats, but that's a whole other thing. So anyway, what performing is, so let's say, so norming would be, okay, Mike, you're the fighter, make sure you're ready for any creatures come down the hall. Jessica, you're the thief, go ahead and check the door for traps. Aldrich, you're the cleric, why don't you get ready in case something happens to start healing, and hey, Mr. Magic User, can you buff us up before, we try this door? All right, so you're saying it verbally, everybody's verbalizing what they need to do for this particular task. That's normal. Performing is you come to a room with the door, what do? And everybody just automatically knows what their role is and just does it. They don't need to verbalize it and tell each other. It's just automatic. They work as a single unit to overcome one task after another. Now, what's interesting is not only do you go through this arc in like a game session or multiple game sessions or campaign, it can happen in a single type of challenge. So if you get really good as a dungeon crawl, like your team is performing in dungeon crawls, but now you're suddenly put into courtroom intrigue adventure.
Ooh.
Completely different skill set, completely different challenges. You have to go all the way back to the forming, storming, norming, performing to figure out who is really best at what in that completely new environment.
Yeah.
That's more kind of a reforming because you at least already know each other.
Well, and just to be, go ahead, Bonsai.
Oh, I just had a question for that because I've played some like a lot of various different games. Do you find that the dungeon action aspect to be like for these groups to be easier to overcome versus like the social intrigue part of these things?
That depends on the people, right?
Okay.
Play styles. We could get into a whole other topic another time about play styles.
Some no.
Yeah, some people are more socializers, some people are more puzzle solvers, some people are more combat centric. So it's going to depend on the individuals and how the group is, which is going to be easier. Some groups really struggle with dungeon crawls, but do really well in the social intrigue because of the makeup of the players and such. So, but you get the idea. So anyway, that kind of fills in with that. It gives you an idea of what we're talking about in a gaming context.
Well, so I have two more questions for you, actually. One, the storming phase. You've talked about how people will get less polite and stuff like that. But just to be clear, like the storming phase doesn't have to be combative between the participants. It's more just it is seeing how people react to the challenge and learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, right?
It can be civil, but it has to be confrontational.
Sure.
There has to be confrontation unless people, so more experienced people won't necessarily need to go through that confrontation as much because they've learned through going through projects over and over. I need to put all my stuff out here. Here's where I'm strong. Here's where I'm weak. Let's get through this now. We've been through this many times. We don't have to figure it out. But what happens is you have a lot of strong-willed people coming in, all very talented and skilled and such. And there is going to be some confrontation. And if people are so confrontation averse and don't have that tension, that level of tension in the storming phase, they don't get to performing. They stay, at best they will get to norming. They'll be very quiet and careful, and they'll get to norming, and they'll verbalize everything. They will never get to performing. It's kind of like what happens with soldiers in the trenches, things like that. That level of tension needs to happen. It's a crucible that forms the group into a single unit, basically. And it doesn't mean that you have to call each other names or anything. And I mean, we have a whole other section in the future about how you can communicate with people in an effective way, like ineffective language. We can talk about that, ineffective language in game group another time.
I feel like we need a supercut of Hawke saying, that's a whole other topic that we could get into. It's a whole other topic that we could get into. It's a whole other aside we could get into.
Yep. Which we do at RPG Research with all the training.
Yeah.
So
the other thing I was going to ask is, I think you've mentioned this in the context of new groups coming together. You talked a little bit about an existing group getting into like a new kind of challenge or something like that. But I think that in a lot of cases, folks are playing with folks that they're gonna play with. There are definitely people who go to conventions and play with different groups all the time. There are definitely people who have multiple groups and they start new groups and they close old groups and they rotate through on a pretty regular basis. But I think anecdotally, and I think broadly, a lot of people find their gaming group and they play with their gaming group, sometimes to their detriment. So what I was curious is, if you're not going through these phases, because, also this is happening on multiple levels. The gaming group itself outside of the game is theoretically going through these cycles. Because, you're the widget you're producing is let's play the game. The first challenge you're encountering is how do we match up the schedules of 6 adults to sit down to do like that kind of thing. But like, if you're not in a situation where you can be like, hey, this group isn't performing, I'm gonna go find a new group. Can you look at this cycle of these kind of 4 phases and use that to help improve a group that maybe is not even passing the storming phase or avoided it and stuck in the norming phase? Like, what do you do if you can't change who's in the group?
Exactly. So Tuckman addressed this in later editions of the theory. So originally it was just the 4 phases. Forming, which means the people have no previous baggage, they don't know each other before. Storming, norming, performing. He then later added adjourning, intentionally mispronounced to keep the rhyme going. And
I was wondering why you were doing that. It was driving me nuts.
It's adjourning, but he intentionally mispronounced it, adjourning to keep the rhyme. And reforming. So he added 2 more in later years through, and these are research studies of thousands and thousands and thousands of groups over decades. And so adjourning is that you succeed one way or the other, or it's the end of the mission one way or the other. You finish the project. Bye, see you, hey, whatever, you go. There is a process, there's a ritual, and the better the ritual is defined, usually the better the feeling of that whole experience is for those people leaving. If you have a good closing of that and a farewell process, there's less, it doesn't feel like people feel like, well, I never got to say goodbye to them and stuff like that. So that's an important thing to take into mind. But then there's reforming. And reforming is you have people who either they're all the same people, or every time a new person gets added, you jump into reforming. So let's say you have an established group and a new person comes in. You have to reform now because you have to figure out, where do I fit in all of this dynamic? It starts the cycle over. And so you can certainly trigger that in an existing group that isn't managing well. I have used, this is where I've used house rules from the Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire to have them build a house. Like, we put a new campaign together. So I've been brought into these dysfunctional groups. Their characters keep dying. The players all know each other's friends. They love gaming, but they suck as players, right? They just can't get it together. And their GM, they rotate through GMs. Nobody respects each other because they're all 14 to 16 years old, whatever. And they want to do better. And so I've literally been brought in and said, all right, we're going to start a new campaign, set everything else aside, and we're going to do this. And I've adapted it to Greyhawk and other settings. We're going to have you build your house. And this house building process creates a unity of the group first before you ever make your characters. And that's been really helpful for dysfunctional groups that I've found, is creating that unity hours before they ever even start to form their first character. So that's one solution. The other one, just with Tuckman, is just that reforming process, is that you do something to put them in a different scenario, different situation that restarts the crucible of storming, and really lean on them to go through that crucible. So as a GM, you have a leadership role here to some degree. You want there to be a team lead of the group, but you have a leadership role. And you can say, all right, everybody, I'm intentionally putting you guys into this for you guys to figure out how you can work together better. That's why I'm doing this. I'm not going to tell you how, because if you just dictate it, that's not as powerful. But I realize this is going to get ugly. Keep it civil and polite to each other, but this is meant to be a crucible to help you guys become a better group. And I've done that.
So if you're in a group and you're having trouble with the group, or you're having trouble in the campaign, then it sounds like maybe planning to take a one shot or a couple session break of just, we're gonna come back to this game, but we're gonna go play this other game just briefly. Try to work out some of our stuff so we're a little more comfortable, and then come back to it may not be a bad idea.
Executive retreats, right? So I've done it with my own staff here, and they hate me for it still. we were
do you spend the whole time asking them what their love language is? Is that why they hate it?
We were doing an Extra Life 25-hour marathon, and we were doing it every night. And I put them through without, and on that part, I should have given them better notice, but I didn't warn them. I put them through a Crucible again because they were just bumbling. They weren't applying all their skill sets that they do in tabletop in the video game. They were off doing their own thing. So I started to just layer after layer, because you can add the DM tools, lets you just add creatures all you want. You just add. And they're like, what is going on?
Oh, man.
Figure out how to apply what you know the tabletop in the video game, because you guys just keep dying and leaving people behind, and that's not what you're supposed to do. And it was, and we've streamed it live, and they hate me to this day for it. But they became incredibly effective. They got through the storming. You know, they were really kind of, they kind of channeled their hatred at me, which helped them. And they got their stuff together, and they started to coordinate. They normed, and they stormed and they normed because they were just stuck in storming. And then they started to perform. They just started to automatically, and that happened in a few hours, like 3-4 hours. And they were tired, right? We're huge marathon, very tired. People are punching, and it worked. You still hate me for it.
Yeah.
But it worked.
I would say there's different, like we talk about the confrontation. I think back to my group, like you're saying, before the game even starts, set up connections or relationships. Like what really worked for us is just we use some tools outside of D&D to form our connections. Like everybody before the campaign had relationships, had a backstory, and we ran a very emotional, connected campaign. So at least half of what we were doing was, we're on the road just chatting with each other. We're establishing these conflicts and these friendships, and then we're just like really building up our characters. So like, I'm an impulsive person, I'm going to do this thing, and now people have to react to these things as well. I think that there's definitely a lot of stuff that you can do just to build relationships.
Every time we start a new game and I'm like, hey, everybody, what if we all played members of the same family or like the same business or something like that? And everyone's like, no. I'm all like, oh, single tier.
Kids on bikes and
bubble gumshoe. Exactly that. You build your community first. You build your high school, junior high, you build your neighborhood, what have you, and build those relationships ahead of time to have those linkages. So these are great for social gaming that way.
Yeah.
So we're running on tight on time, of course. When we didn't get to the two paradoxes. Let me summarize the two paradoxes, because that's what it was supposed to be about today.
Okay.
So there are two paradoxes about being an individual in a group and such. So paradox one, according to these theories, is, and it's come up in this conversation, while you're focusing on a task, so you're focusing on the dungeon, you're focusing on the challenge, the personal conflict and issues that are going on aren't being focused on, aren't being addressed, because you're focusing on the task. The moment you stop to focus on the interpersonal stuff, the tasks usually aren't getting done, right? You're stopping and talking, hey, I don't appreciate it when you do this, and you assume that I this, and the task isn't getting done. And you will see that in groups all the time. You will see this back and forth. And it's an interesting paradox that happens. There is a switch, focus on the task, focus on the group. And you can kind of do a little bit here and there, but really it's kind of a binary on and off gateway that you have to take some time to address these. Because if you don't, the issues build, and the group becomes increasingly dysfunctional. And so you want to keep that in mind. If you don't have breaks in the game as you go from room to room to room, like the DM sets up a room where just challenge after challenge, and there's no chance for them to just sit and talk around the campfire to address some issues, the group can very likely implode.
Yeah.
Well, I think that also applies narratively, I think, where, if especially because a lot of the games that I really love are games that are very heavy on this character's subplot, like Vampire, L5R, things like that. They tend to have the scenes where like, I need to go do my thing. My subplot needs to happen. And if you're only focusing on subplots, or if you're only focusing on the main story, you end up with kind of a weird narrative disconnect too, where things don't feel as natural or holistic as they would have if you had kind of hopped back and forth on those. And that's a very good example of a binary, because if you have the spotlight on a thing, you can sometimes intertwine them, but a spotlight can only be on one spot at any point at the table. So you have to kind of make sure that it rotates around.
Yeah, there's juggling versus focus, and you get a lot more done when you've got that focus than when you're just kind of juggling the plates in the air. So the other part, paradox 2, there's 2 paradoxes, is individual freedom versus group identity and belonging. So the key thing is that, you know, at least in Western culture especially, we like to have our individual freedom to do what we want to do. Kind of the example you just gave there. And so, but at the same time, as human beings, these large frontal cortexes, in part, we believe, evolutionary theory, were developed to keep track of social rules because we are inherently social creatures. You know, we all have a whole spectra of introvert, extrovert, and all that, but ultimately we are social creatures as opposed to individual creatures. And so in a group, our social needs to some extent become satisfied. But most notably the need for a self-concept maintenance. It helps us establish our self-identity in the context of a group. So when I'm in the gaming group and I get this identity that I'm the healer, the helper, whatever, and I may have a very different self-concept when I'm hanging out with the bowling league or something, right? This changes from group, your self-concept identity can change from group to group on a lot of dynamics. But it helps us with trying to define that. If you sit off in a cave by yourself, you're going to get some interesting self-concept, but you're not going to get any feedback loop to help you with that. And the problem is when you're in a group, you have to give up some freedoms because there are expectations of how you should behave in the group that aren't an issue when you're alone, but are very problematic in the group. So you give up some freedoms and you have to constantly figure out this, where am I going to be in how much am I going to really be a group participant and you lose your identity in the group versus hanging on to your own individual identity. So that's a very, and each of these are whole lecture topics on themselves, but thinking about this in gaming context, it's very important for people, now that we've introduced it to you, think the next time you're in a game where your character's identity versus the part of the group versus your own identity with the other players, watch for that, because as you're exposed to these things, you start watching these dynamics and you really go, oh, that's really interesting. A lot of people say doing all this research and study ruins the game, but I have not met a single person who's been through it who has said that. Instead, they now see all these other layers going on that they had no idea was happening before.
That's like the people who say that science ruins the beauty of something, when it's like, it just gives you another avenue to enjoy it. I think to kind of tie up and give a really specific piece of advice to folks, is that you should probably be aware of what role everybody serves in your group who is playing the games outside of the game, and to make sure that everyone's also happy with the role that they end up playing. Because I think in a role-playing groups in particular, you'll often find that the GM ends up being the one who has to plan the game, schedule the game, get everyone to commit. And if you can break up some of those, that might reduce a lot of the stress that some people in the group might be experiencing. But then the other thing too is, I would recommend a lot of people consider going into a campaign if you don't have a clear idea in your mind. If you're hey, I want to play this character, and you're that's a shining vision in your mind, explore that character. But a lot of times I approach a game with I don't know what I'm going to play. I'm going to see what everybody else does, and then I'm going to find out what they didn't do, and then I'm going to go do that. So there have been I don't usually play clerics, but there have been plenty of times where sure, we don't have a cleric. I'll be the cleric. I'll put my spin on it, but at least knowing that I'm going into it being the cleric support, help other people thing, if you consciously understand and accept that, I think you can make a character who will succeed at that, and that you'll be more interested in engaging with than if everyone just made their own and we all show up and it's all party of rogues, unless that's the kind of game that you want.
And this can just apply not only to gaming, but just life in general. Even Emma, you've pointed out there's things that we as people can identify, hey, this is okay things, these are not okay things, right? Yeah. So, but man, that like I said, can apply to real life. This is just a very social concept that just in general that can apply. And thank you.
Make your gaming group more effective, and everybody will have more fun, and you'll have those wonderful stories. that are lifelong stories. When you get to that performing phase, that's where the incredible flow states happen more frequently. You have this group collective experience that's just phenomenal. And you hear people talk about it decades later. It's quite amazing.
Yep. But yeah, I we can go on. If we were given like hours and hours, we would branch out and have so much more discussion. But unfortunately, like we usually do here, we're like, there's just never enough time. But it's okay, guys, because guess what? Hawke's just gonna always be coming back because we're like, no, please tell us more, and all that good stuff. But speaking of which, since we're going ahead and gonna do a lightning round of what we have, the more information that we have. So very quickly, our temporary bundle lightning round. Derek.
Great. So we have 2 bundles and 1 sale to let you know about today. First, on Humble Bundle, there's a 3D printable models bundle. And we don't usually talk a ton about 3D printing because it's hard to gauge how widespread adoption of that is yet. But I think it's growing more and more, and bundles like this that are a bunch of 3D modeling files for relatively cheap, I feel are a good way for folks who kind of been considering or wanting to mess around. Like, it's a good thing to either use to take the plunge now to justify it, or maybe it's worth picking up if you think that in a year or 2 you might get one, so that you kind of start with a library of stuff you can experiment with. So there's a bundle that's kind of generally useful for fantasy games overall. There's a bunch of terrain. There's like scattered terrain. There's little wells and stairs and all this kind of stuff that you can print. There's also a handful of miniatures, like larger miniatures. Most of them are kind of like ogre-ish or brute-ish kind of things. So there's not necessarily a ton of variety there. But you do get a lot of miniatures and a lot of the scatter stuff for... again, it's a Humble Bundle, so it's not going to be very expensive, and it benefits charity. So if you've been considering dipping your toe into 3D printing, you're going to want to check that out and maybe pick that up. And if you're already into it, then it will give you a whole bunch of stuff to play with.
Yep. And this one, what charity does it support on that?
I'm not sure.
Cancer Research UK and Make-A-Wish Foundation. So that's the one. Yeah.
So then another thing on Humble Bundle, or Humble this week, in the Humble store, not actually a bundle, but relevant to some of the headlines that came up, is there's a pretty significant sale on a number of Asmodee digital titles. Some of them are only 15% off, but plenty of them are 50 or 60% off. So, some highlights include Scythe, Blood Rage, Terraforming Mars. Like, those are very popular, hardcore tabletop gamer titles. All the classics that we usually see in an Asmodee digital sale, like Carcassonne, Pandemic, Ticket to Ride, all that kind of stuff, those are also there. But if you've been looking to fill out your digital collection, check out the sale while it is still going on. And then our familiar bundle of holding bundle is Goodman 5e Fantasy. So Goodman Games, if anybody isn't familiar, is an independent publisher who's done a number of like 3rd edition and 5th edition supplements and pamphlets, and they've got a lot of different styles. A lot of it is very old school. They also make Dungeon Crawl Classics kind of thing. But this is a bundle of just a smorgasbord of adventures and encounters and a whole bunch of different elements. If you just need more stuff to send your players through, then go check that out. And that is it for bundles for this week.
That was there we go. We got through bundles, but we also have more because now Derek is also the Kickstarter queen.
Chats.
Well, so as we were talking about during the beginning, Bonsai actually has more projects this week that she has selected. So I feel like I'm the Kickstarter queen pretender to the throne as opposed to the true and legitimate ruler.
You just delegated it. Delegated it to your subjects.
Well, not only that, but I apparently failed Emma entirely by not selecting this and putting it on the list. So let's start off with my shame, Emma.
I also put it in the Slack last week, like right after the show, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't missed. So I don't know, someone dropped the ball there because someone wanted to withhold Cat Sudoku Roll and Write game for 1 to 6 players from the adoring Cat game fans with 3 days left, ending Monday, August 24th. This is a game, another game by designer Tatewu. I think I've been talking about him a lot lately because I recently got Cat Rescue, which is a older Kickstarter from their game company. It was great, super fun. Played that. I also played Cleopatra, which was another Kickstarter that I backed that just came in, just got delivered.
Seems to be some sort of theme here.
Yeah.
I can't quite pick up on it.
Yeah, it's hard to connect exactly what the relationship is. Also, sidebar, I got Calico as a game. My cat game collection is growing by leaps and bounds.
But it's not really about the sorry.
I agree completely.
It's interesting that you bring this up because I actually want to do a Twitter poll about this and really dig into or claw into what makes a cat game. I think that I love cats, obviously. I consider myself a collector of cat games, but I'm interested to see what the world thinks about what qualifies as a cat game.
The moment that somebody comes out with a full line of cat dice, you are going to have a problem. Or an opportunity.
So back to Cat Sudoku. It's not actually exactly Sudoku. So I think it definitely has very gamey elements to it. It reminded me a little bit of something like Gone Chun Clever. What I love about Tatewu's games is pretty simple mechanics, but very interesting emergent gameplay to them. So even if you are a fan of Sudoku, I think
the same thing again. It is a Kickstarter board game. So there are lots of minis. It's raised 2.4 million so far. The previous one was in 2016 and it raised like 3.6. So we'll see where this ends up. But this adds a ton of angels, a ton of demons, a bunch of new factions, a ton of minis, lots of little bits and bobs, custom dice. It's like $145 for the package of both heaven and hell. Fight! So if you like Kickstarter board games, if you like dungeon crawl games, if you want a bunch of minis, if you love Massive Darkness, then you have 4 days left to get in on this deal.
Nice.
With what if I have grammatical complaints?
So if you're going to complain about how darkness can be massive, then let's go visit a black hole, Emma. Let's go visit a black hole.
But that's compressed darkness.
Still darkness. Still darkness.
But it's not massive darkness.
Still darkness. No, it is. It is by definition massive.
I guess massive. It has
massive.
But is it about a black hole then? Is this game
irrelevant? Irrelevant. Is Calico about cats? So you accept Calico, but Massive Darkness is where that's a double standard. It's a double standard.
But the black hole's supposed to be a compressive of black, like
Calico
darkness.
Is all about you trying to build your quilts in such a way that you attract the cats to sit on them. I don't see why that is not related to cats.
It's about the quilt. If it was called quilting for cats, that would have been acceptable. But Calico is focused on the cat.
It's a type of fabric. It's a pun.
All right.
Anyway.
Got a lot of feelings.
All right. So with 6 days left, Thursday, August 27th, Immune. So this is a strategic board game for 1 to 6 players about immune systems to fight deadly virus. Like, I would honestly get this game if this is like a really good educational, like legit educational game. Like, if this was given to me in my like not middle school, maybe high school, like biology class, this would teach me a whole bunch. So that's why I also just like really, really like the premise of this game is like, it's a notion of real viruses attacking with real world symptoms. And as players, you have to battle using real world immune responses. Like, this is all a game that's like very, very, if you're like your big old biology, anatomy, science nerd and want to go ahead and get this game, this is, or like, have a game that you can teach with it. Like, this hands down would be like an incredible game just to have in classrooms. And as a fun note, for every 20 games sold, one will be donated to a classroom. So
awesome.
That's
I love to see educational games that kind of include that element in their project.
Yeah. And also, the artwork is just amazing. So if you guys want to go ahead, check out Heavy Science strategic game that I would probably like suggest it either a very, very, like a very smart middle schooler or high schooler level of gaming.
When I first saw the project, I was worried that it was going to be some crappy COVID tie-in thing, where like you were playing the lungs, and like everyone was trying to. And then I was scrolling through it, and I'm like, this sounds way better than that. Let's add it to the list.
Osmosis Jones.
Yeah, it's Osmosis Jones, but it had like, look at it is. It's kind of like that. Man, you guys watch that. That
There's some. What is the
movie.
anime that's all about? All the characters are
Cells at Work. Cells at Work.
Yep.
Cells at Work.
Yep.
What?
I hear, have you not heard about that? It's a whole anime where all of the characters are cute anthropomorphized different cells of the body, and I think it follows like a white blood cell.
Yep.
On her work around the
red
body
blood cell.
Okay.
White blood cells are the ones that.
Yeah. Why not? I think is the better question to ask with anime.
Yeah, the red blood cell falls for the white blood cell soldier type. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cells at Work.
Apparently, it's great.
So yeah, that has 6 days left. Immune with another game with 6 days left, August 27th. The Great American Witch. So this is a modern Gothic tabletop RPG where you play powerful witches of the Covenant and within a conflict with supernatural and secret society. So if you happen to like Vampires of the Masquerade and those type of games, you probably would enjoy this. The players take a role of witches of legend, which are kind of like witches that have the power to destroy society. Not like they're just super, super powerful, but they like their power level is like disruptive technology kind of level. Each character has a Coven speaks to their personality type, like almost like clans in another type of game that you could.
I feel like you're trying to sell this to a very particular audience that consists of me.
But I mean, the cooler thing is that with this, they made note that your gender does not make you a witch or a wizard. It's just you are a witch. And the system is based on the Great American Novel RPG, which was, by the way, nominated for the best rules and game of the year. This for Indie's Groundbreakers Award. The system is very narrative storytelling, very similar to Apocalypse Engine, Fate style kind of games. And this isn't supposed to be a one-off type of game. This is a long campaign urban fantasy. So if you guys are interested, The Great American Witch with 6 days left.
Yeah, if a certain person is really into it, it'd be cool because then we could all play the game. Right?
Yeah.
If there's a certain person who
wait. Are you trying to force me? Are you trying to trick me into backing an RPG just so I run it for you?
No.
Okay, so now that we're in the storming stage of our relationship here, I feel like if we just directly said, Derek, could you please run the game for me? We could get to the norming and performing part much faster.
I just want to
clear communication is key here, people.
I just want to play more games. We had so much fun with Alien.
Yeah, we did. I want to do more
games.
board games. Yeah, and even Hawke, come and play with us too.
I'd love to.
So okay, here. Derek, can we play more RPGs together, please?
Yes. Asterisk.
There.
Absolutely. Offer not valid in all states or at all times.
Some exclusions may apply.
Some exclusions may apply. Depends on the situation. But yes, that was the last of our Kickstarters today here on TableTakes. But be aware, TableTakes is like Gen Con TV isn't just TableTakes. We have a whole slew of shows coming at you. Our streaming schedule, if you guys didn't know and aren't aware, these times are Pacific Standard Time. So Monday, 6 p.m., Board Games with the Brothers Mirth. Wednesdays, 1:30 p.m., This Game Gets Dicey. And Fridays at 2 p.m., you can come see our faces here at TableTakes and get all of that sweet gamer or tabletop related news and gossip around. Remember, folks, to follow, subscribe, turn on those notifications so you don't miss a show. And if you do miss a show, we're on YouTube at 24 hours after this has been broadcast. I want to go ahead and say thank you all for all of you to coming in, watching, you know, doing all the stuff, telling, retweeting, tweets, and all that things. And also, especially, thank you so much, Hawke, for always like making us want to learn more and more. Yeah. And then, of course, all the things that you do, if you guys haven't and you're interested in all of these things about being inclusive of people with diversity and from different walks of life, please check out RPG Research, and also volunteer.
.com, yeah, research.com.
Yeah.
Any chance I can squeeze in the lightning of the things coming up the next week at 3?
Yeah.
Yep. Race through it.
All right, so we got the Kickstarter related. Inspire Isles is the RPG to teach role-playing games through the role-playing game. It is originally just British Sign Language, but they made all their stretch goals and added American Sign Language. That project's now underway. There's a lot of PhDs, doctors, and teachers involved with this project. They've got a Discord channel that's very active. I did the largest donation to get right on the front of the page there, and so I'll be very excited about that because we run our ASL RPG groups. So check that out. It's on Kickstarter. It's Inspire Isles. It's based on Celtic kind of mythology and apparently also inspired by Zelda somewhat, apparently. So check that out. We are now in phase, at RPG Research, we are now in phase 2 of our brain-computer interface controlled role-playing game. I kid you not, play a role-playing game with just your brain, with just electrodes hooked up. This is specifically to be, you know, for accessibility, quadriplegic, tetraplegic, etc. But it has all sorts of great applications. So we've been working on it for over a year, a bunch of volunteer, more than 10 volunteer developers. We finished phase 1, which is Neverwinter Nights adventure set in Shakespeare. Shakespeare's The Tempest, and that server's live. People can play through Shakespeare's The Tempest and Neverwinter Nights. That's the prototype story that we're building the BCI game in a multiplayer, turn-based brain-computer interface. So watch for that. Again, these are all at rpgresearch.com. You can get more info. We're continuing our Spark Central and drop-in RPG programs that are open to all, and you can check that out at rpgresearch.com/events. We really, really need a volunteer coordinator and a community outreach and fundraiser person, marketing person. We have lots and lots of game masters and researchers and archivists and all that, lots of just doing that, but we have very little administrative staff. We have 120, 130 volunteers across 5 continents and no volunteer coordinator, and I'm drowning. And so we really need administrative volunteers to please help us. So rpgresearch.com/volunteer.
Hawke, why don't we make a note to have you back sometime soon, and we can maybe do a stream to focus on how people can get involved in that. Because you know, we for the next couple of weeks we don't have a show scheduled after TableTakes.
Okay.
So if you want to take a 45 minutes or an hour or something like that, and we can kind of more carefully walk through RPG Research and what you need in that role, we can try to put that together for you.
That would be wonderful. Thank you for that. RPG Museum is progressing. We've got archivists now, and we're getting ready to start unboxing the 25 boxes that were donated of historical, some of it unpublished material, unpublished books, correspondence between hundreds of different media and other creators of role-playing games and such, spanning all the way back to 1971, pre-first published D&D. All sorts of great stuff there, and we got a few more items added to that. So that's coming along. We're about to start our first BECME arc. That's Basic Expert Companion Masters Immortals D&D to show the full arc, because very few people really appreciate what that whole learning curve is. And it has really good foundational stuff to make players better players and GMs better GMs, and really great creative stuff. It's from 1983. We're adapting it as best we can to BFRPG later on, but we're doing that whole arc every Wednesday evening. We'll be broadcasting that. And Tolkien Moot 16 is happening September 19th, all day long. It's all Tolkien all day long. And it's the Númenórean arc, the Second Age, the rise of the Númenóreans, the next year, the peak of the Númenóreans and their glory. And then the year after that, the fall of the Númenóreans. We have multiple guest speakers from Tolkienology sources on that, all free and open to the public. So check that out at tolkienmoot.org. And then talk some other time about Gen Con and World Con and all that and the whole online gaming thing. We have a ton we could talk about that Derek. I know you could, and we've got our whole World Con boards and all that. I think we should do a special segment on that because it's going to influence the future in multiple ways.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
Like, people are going to have to play online for quite a while.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. Like, yeah, please check out all of these links that we posted in chat if you want to go ahead and help out with all of these amazing things with Hawke and RPGresearch.com. I wanted to go ahead and say thank you again for Derek and Emma for joining us today. And also thank you, Marcus, for being behind the scenes. You guys have a wonderful, yes, Friday. Today's Friday. Friday. Time exists. I'll see you guys next week.